Hi everybody, I'm Marcia Caro.
Hello, I'm Carol Cooper.
And we're here today with Nigel, who works in New York for a non-profit organisation as a People Development Director. Over to you, Nigel.
Hi, nice to be here. Marcia and I worked together in previous years and got to know one another. And a lot of us right now are just sort of sharing things just freely and openly that we found useful in these very difficult times. So we thought it would be good to have a conversation. And when we talked, we thought that there are some ideas here that we would like to share with a wider audience. So I hope that what we're going to look at today is going to be helpful. We're actually going to use some slides. As Marcia said, I've had the privilege for a number of years now working in the non-profit sector, which has all its own weird and wacky problems compared to the for-profit arena. But there are lessons, within that for us because we're all human, no matter where we are, and we tend to have certain things that help and certain things that get in the way. And so we can look at a few of those today.
Fantastic. Did I get your title right, Nigel?
Yes, they call me a training and development director. So yeah, it sounds glorious, doesn't it? But it's just me. But I do lots of things, using digital mediums, and we have DVDs and all kinds of training things that we put out across the Eastern United States. So it's been a wonderful role now for a good many years.
Fantastic. Now, Karen and I run a Facebook group, which is around mentoring coaching. And we've had a lot of the members asking us questions around change, and it's one of the topics that we've covered before in interviews with Chris Sweeney. We did a two-part interview with Chris Sweeney, but we've got some questions that we're probably going to throw in as we're going along your presentation. And in particular, these questions have come from one of our members called Happiness Effion, and she's got a lot of questions around how to manage change more effectively, and I know that's part of what you're going to deliver to us today. So I'll just leave you to take it forward.
Sounds good. Okay. I just got a few sort of visuals for us just to sort of focus our attention. I think we're living in, the visual, what do they call it, the visual era, where people sort of tend to be looking somewhere and hopefully are looking at the things that we're looking at. So I called this sort of set of material when I've offered this to other folks, shape the change or have it shape us. We're living in a time which is just very strange, very unexpected. And there's lots of things that come up from that, and many of those things, if we're aware of them, we can influence them. If we're not so aware of them, they may well influence us, and that may not be good, especially with all the sort of economic impact of many of these things. So let's dive in a little bit. So before we get into this, I just want to look what it says on the screen here. The novelty wore off a while back of this whole coronavirus thing. We understand governments have needed to do drastic things to try to curtail the impact of the virus. But the economic impact, the personal impact, the practical impact has been very considerable. And there are concerns. I mean, one of the concerns coming up right now is, is all this way of handling the virus and stuff, is it doing more harm than good? Would it have been better to just let the virus play out? And all kinds of huge questions. And many of those are just outside of our job description. But the point is, how are we going through this as leaders and individuals, first of all, and then as people managing other people, because there is a very real impact. So some people will be familiar with this diagram. It's quite famous. I love this bit along the bottom too. So I just thought we'd just spend a few moments looking at this, because it's all very well saying, oh, I've seen this before, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but it's not just about grief. It's also about emotions and how emotions that we go through stages, and it's not a linear line either. But it's worth being aware, I think, as leaders, for ourselves, let alone for our people, to just be aware of what these things are. So let's just have a quick peek here. The first stage of dealing with enormous change that's often imposed upon us is what they call the denial stage. So you may have seen this at the cultural level and at the community level and the individual level. So, denial. We've heard about this virus. Oh, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. It'll just be like the flu. Okay. And therefore some avoidance has gone on there. And then, of course, there's a stage of confusion. Oh boy, apparently this is quite serious. Apparently it really could be, quite okay. And then there's a bit of elation. Oh, great, I get to work from home. Oh, great, things are going to change. Okay, well, this, let's make the most of it. Okay. And then that got old pretty quickly, especially folks that still have to go to work and so forth. And then there's a little bit of shock. My gosh, is it, the apocalypse happening here? What's going on? And of course, eventually, even the most buoyant of people become somewhat fearful. It takes an awful lot to get me scared, But as someone with asthma, and of course this is a respiratory condition, I certainly felt a bit of fear, because if I get the virus, who knows how that's going to play out? Maybe it'll be a big deal, maybe it won't. So it's very personal for many folks, and of course we've all got relatives and so forth. So denial, and as a leader of however many people, but also a leader of you, don't forget, because you lead yourself first of all. It's worth just acknowledging, you know, I've probably been there. Probably not there now, but I've probably been there. Now, some people tend to get stuck in the journey. Some people are still living in denial, and you'll see that all around you. But let's just acknowledge that, because that may be our customers still a bit in denial, you know, as to what they really need to do or ought to do and stuff. Some people, of course, for various reasons, have gone through this anger stage. They're angry at the government. They're angry at how it was handled. They're angry at how it wasn't handled. They're angry at many things. So frustration, irritation, and, you know, underlying anxiety. What about the economic impact? What about the practical impact? What about, you know, the future? Because even the future, as we start to navigate the future, is starting to look a little bit intimidating because of various restrictions and all the practical stuff to do with that. Other folks have gone through quite literally depression. They feel quite overwhelmed. They feel quite helpless. Maybe their jobs have been cut back, or they've been furloughed, or all these other different possibilities. Some people have literally been terminated fairly quickly. Enormous impact there for those folks. Feelings of helplessness, you know, I just don't know what to do. I've got kids to think about, all sorts of things. Hostility, running away. We've had literally in this part of the world people running away to faraway places because they've got holiday homes or what have you. So if you notice here, you know, for you and for your folks, there's two stages here to do with information and communication, and then really emotional support to sort of acknowledge that, you know, I'm not normally someone who gets depressed, but I'm kind of depressed. I'm going stir crazy. Or I'm having to go to work and I'm depressed about, you know, the fact that I have to go to work, all kinds of different things. Then there's usually a bit of bargaining, struggling to sort of find meaning. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my folks? What does this mean for my work, for my situation, my job? Reaching out to others, people telling their story, of course, you know, social media can sort of help folks, but eventually we need what it says at the bottom here, which is sort of guidance and direction. With ourselves and with our folks, and eventually an acceptance of whatever will be the case and is going to be the case, and then exploring new options and putting some kind of a new plan in place so we can begin to sort of re-engage the world in whatever sense. So then, please.
Yeah, really interesting, because one of the points that Happiness has made is, if I wait long enough, will this change and this system just go away? And actually, that's the denial part of the model, isn't it? Yes. That actually, it's, you know, it doesn't actually go away. You can sit and wait it out, but it doesn't actually go away.
True, and I've seen folks, examples even of people, even freelancers out there, you know, who are sort of they sort of sat tight in the bunker for a while, yes, kind of in denial. Then eventually they're sort of poking their heads out thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't ending. You know, what am I going to do? And so they're having to sort of bargain, as it says here, with, okay, how am I going to play this? Yeah. Because I thought, you know, if I just be patient, it might sort of go away. But there's got to be, I mean, acceptance is partly understanding what am I dealing with and how am I going to deal with it? Because we can't just hide away forever and we can't do everything from home necessarily. There's got to be, you know, some kind of, especially with a team in place.
And I think she's grappling as well, Happiness, with the choices that she's got at the moment when she is in lockdown and she can't do all the things that she would normally be doing, even though she's connected by IT systems, etc. It's a very unsettling time, and we know that from our own experiences, don't we, how unsettling it is. But, you know, a question is, what are my choices around this? It's happening.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily sit back.
Definitely. And sometimes that's also overwhelmed by choice.
Yeah.
You know, because these are not just ordinary choices. These are choices from among very strange and unusual and unexpected options. And that's quite scary, because you're not just, you know, exercising your freedom, you're exercising your freedom about decisions that are quite serious in their impact and maybe much more limited choices to what you'd normally have. So yeah, and that's why I think this model is relevant, to sort of notice, where have I been? Where am I at? And of course, you know, it's not a straight line. It's not a linear progression. You'll cycle back occasionally into depression. You'll cycle back again into trying to grapple and bargain with things. But as you know, sometimes to make no decisions or no choices is to have made a choice. And it will have an impact. So just being much more sort of, they call it, don't they, these days, mindful of, you know, what is going on in here and what am I going to be doing with that? Just so you sort of stay as present and as focused as possible.
And Happiness equally asks the question, what if I disagree with the changes?
Mm.
Because that's quite paramount, really, because obviously you're in denial and you're angry and you're all of this, and you're waiting for someone to offer you something, but it might not be what you want. So,
and that goes back, really, doesn't it, to this sort of bargaining and acceptance stage, which is, you know, I may be depressed that I can't do this and I can't do that, or if I do, it's going to be in all sorts of excruciating terms. I know people running retail businesses who are saying, you know, even if we can open, if we've got to do all this distancing or what have you, that we're just never going to sell enough to make it almost worth the, you know, the effort. So very important. So, you know, some kind of acceptance, you know, that business about what's that wonderful phrase, we'll come onto this again later on, about, you know, understanding what I can change, what I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference.
That's right.
yeah.
Very real right now, you know, to start
very, very apt. Yeah.
So let's just add a couple more bits here. You know, it's worth understanding that, you know, you yourself as an individual and as a leader may have gone through some of these things. Let's just look at that first of all, you know, some kind of personal loss or trauma. There are people suffering behind the scenes. You know, some folks, you know that phrase, you know, most of us lead lives of quiet desperation. Well, that's, you know, variable to some degree, but some people really do. And what happens is they get triggered by what's going on, worse than they ever would have done because of very abnormal circumstances. Some people are suffering loss. Some people still pass away during these periods, and some people are coping with that on top of everything else. And there may be other sort of personal suffering. Anxiety and friction may be occurring at home because, you know, just because you're able to go into the office every day and do what you're doing and at least, you know, get things moving along, some folks at home are literally stuck at home. And my apologies for the noise. It's amazing, isn't it? The day you need to do something online is the day people show up nearby with noisy equipment. Hopefully we'll see that come to an end in just a moment. And then work-related changes. You know, we're having to do business differently. We're having to even pause business for a while and to sort of work out, you know, how are we going to manage that. I mean, a lot of folks have been saying, you know, we can still encourage conversation to occur that will lead to good things in the future. But just sort of really having to think a bit more strategically about, okay, what can I do? And, you know, when will I be doing that? Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of application, you know, how does this model apply to me as a leader? You know, firstly of me, and then of my people. That might be worth just pausing for a second to look at.
Yeah. I think one of the question here is about when you're working with people and you've got a team that you work to, or is working to you rather, that you can feel that you're having to do more in these times of change than your job description, job title initially dictated, and that can feel like, to use happiness as word, feel like being forced to do more for the same pay. It's not like a negotiation. It's actually a case of
yes, it can feel quite
a directive.
I mean, that raises an important point, partly for individuals, but also for their teams, which is that, you know, employers, from what I can see, are having to start to just acknowledge, if they haven't already, you know, these are not normal times. You know, there's going to have to be some flexing. It may have to mean, you know, more than your normal day's work for a while for some. Some people are being furloughed. Some people are having their jobs radically changed for a temporary period. But also, you know, the measurement of you know, people's work and people's output is having to be, you know, just kept, you know, taken a bit more lightly to some degree, to just acknowledge we're going to have to do some different things and just, you know, all hands to the pump type thing. So
I've had many conversations, Nigel, with people who are saying that they feel like they're doing more now whilst they're at home than they were when they were actually in their organisation.
And that may mean, you know, partly that they're just able to be more productive. You know, there's less stuff that gets in the way. I think one of the difficulties, as we know, you know, as leaders and working with leaders, is that, you know, you can only see so much, and often there are things that we end up getting embroiled in that we don't realise are maybe not that necessary, or maybe are just sort of the way we do it, and we don't necessarily question that. So there's many different things going on there. So working out what's working in this strange period that I might want to hold on to for the future.
Yeah. That's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because I suppose if you're being asked to do more, that's one angle, isn't it? But then if you feel that you're being more productive with your time, that's a totally different way of looking at things, isn't it? And the outcomes of both of those are very different.
Well, true, and you've got to watch it too, because some of us are givers. Do you know what I mean? We'll give and give and give and fail to take care of ourselves. I just did the session earlier this week for a bunch of leaders who really needed to just spend some time looking at self-care Because, you know, if you're not careful, some of us will break our backs for everyone else, and then suddenly we're collapsing in a heap, and life at home has become chaotic because we're not even hardly home anymore. We're not present when we are home. So, you know, that raises the issue of self-care. Yeah. And also for your team members, you know, if you've got folks that you can see are actually getting put upon, one of the sort of cruelties of being a super producer is that people come to you because you get stuff done. And sometimes, you know, the folks that are not quite so good at getting stuff done end up getting a lighter load while your load gets heavier. So it's very important to just gently manage that and perhaps do a check-in and say, you know, so let me just check, what is it that you're working on? You need to make sure you're not too overburdened because, you know, we need to take care of it.
So Nigel, sorry, Happiness is asking as well, what are the risks of not changing? Talking about the, you know, what all of the support for your team, and I get that and I understand it, and we all go that extra mile, but what are the risks of not changing?
Well, I suppose that's going to vary depending on your circumstance, but there is I know a model that I can't think of the name of right now, but it really just asks us to do an analysis of that very question. You know, what are the benefits of changing? What are the losses of changing? What are the benefits of not changing? And what are the risks of not changing? So doing a sort of 4-quadrant analysis like that can actually be very powerful. I think it's part of what they call motivational interviewing and things, where you start to summon your motivational resources to get extremely clear. Because what happens is, you know, like in motivation theory, you find that there are certain aspects of change that will be the driver for you. So some of us, we run away from things that are definitely going to hurt us. Other people won't. It's only when they believe that, you know, maybe there's something in this for them that they'll change. So sort of doing all 4 of those quadrants in an analysis for you would be very powerful, because you're going to find the one that makes you go, oh boy, I really need to be doing something.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So, I mean, let's just push on then to something else. This is very relevant, firstly, at the individual level. You know, being aware that this is going on, whether you realize it or not, and managing accordingly. First of all, managing yourself, because, you know, you're a part of this team, even if you're the leader. There's something I would probably call, you know, team reforming. You know, however your team was functioning with you as the leader and stuff before, you're going to be reset to some degree or another, whatever your industry is, even if you're, you know, emergency essential workers and things, you're going to be to some extent forming a new team. And it may be doing similar work, but that work's probably changed and adjusted to some degree. And therefore, because the work is different, because the goals, the outcomes, the drivers are different, you're going to struggle a little bit with productivity, possibly, but you're certainly going to enter what they tend to call the storming phase, on and off here and there, because you're going to have new tasks, the ball is going to get dropped occasionally, and you're going to have to help the team get to grips with that and help yourself get to grips with that and manage your own expectations. So we talked just now about being a bit more realistic about what we can expect of people, a bit kinder, cutting people a little bit more grace to just acknowledge that these are strange times. We're going to struggle at points, and to then acknowledge that, you know, new norms will be created for that, just in terms of how the work is and what the work is and all that stuff for now, whatever industry we're in. And then I'm afraid it's not going to stop anytime soon, is it? Because just as you start, you know, it's like when you have a child, they say, you know, just when you get to grips with everything and the feeding and the this and that, they change. And suddenly, you know, you've got to adjust again to the fact that the child is growing and stuff. So this child, if you like, of your business or your situation is going to keep changing. So you're going to find yourself, you or a partnership or a small team, continuing to sort of have to go back and say, okay, things have changed again. Now we're not just going over here, we're going over there. And now we're broadening a little bit what we're doing. So, you know, acknowledging that you're always somewhere at some stage on this journey can be quite powerful. And so you know, the takeaway for most folks is just understanding that this is happening and sort of just keeping a bit of a track. So, I mean, I would suggest if I was working with a leader one-on-one, you know, maybe looking at this once a week on a Monday morning and just spending a few minutes thinking, okay, where are we on this? Do you mean, are we having friction that we don't normally have, tension we don't normally have? Okay, how do we fix that? How do we improve that? I'll give you a little model at the end for sort of finding solutions to repeated problems. And just, you know, trying to work out what are the current norms and do any of those need to change?
I think that's really important. It was something that I always did in my role because I worked across a long, huge area, but always trying to link in with the team, because if you're not always there with them, you can't always give them support. So just try and link in to find out what, you know, may have happened to them over the weekend and how are they, what's their thinking of coming into work on Monday morning, or, you know, just to show some support, and if there are changes in the wind, just to forewarn people before things happen as well.
Yes.
One can, yeah.
Definitely. So there's a little bit more of sort of conscious and intentional management where you think, I was listening to something this week where the guy was saying, you know, even with your customers, even if there's nothing to tell them, nothing has happened.
Yeah.
Call them, he said, 3 times a week to let them know. I'm just calling to let you know there's nothing happening right now, but you're in my thoughts. You know, I've always got your situation on my mind and stuff. People adore that because it basically says you are important to me.
Yeah,
absolutely. If they've got anything to say, and that simple technique. But for some of us, of course, that means getting organised. I mean, it means scheduling. You know, Friday afternoon, a little check-in with each client or each, you know, staff member or whoever it is to just make sure they know you are not forgotten. And if there's news to report, I'll tell you. And if there's no news, well, that's news, frankly.
Yeah.
To build trust.
Yeah. And show support. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered that, but let's just talk for a second then about, you know, what causes people to resist necessary changes. You know, it's quite an important question. You know, various things, but I would just go back to the fact that, you know, in any sense at all, fundamentally, we have to just get more aware that fear is coming up more than normal, period. Fear for my job. You know, I've even been afraid for my job. You know, what's happening with my job? Am I going to get, you know, furloughed? Am I going to get 50% pay? Am I going to be laid off? I have to sort of ask that question, which is not a question I would ever normally think to ask. So just understanding that really fear is the primary thing. So later on, I'm going to give you a little model as to how to sort of have a good dialogue with your staff member and ask them, you know, what they fear, really. And you won't say, what do you fear? You'll say something along the lines of, you know, what concerns do you have right now that I should be aware of? Because it's also...
Sorry, people are searching, aren't they, for security right now? In a time of constant change from one day to the next, you know, different managers, different team members, people are still going off sick, people are still wanting to return to roles and things. And so what was normal, you know, 9 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, is no longer normal now. And so people are grappling and trying to find security wherever they can. And in amongst all that, there is this thing around the resistance and the reluctance bits that pop up because simply they're looking for security. And so whilst it might look like they're kicking against things, they're just trying to find solid ground under the feet.
And that's an important
starting place.
Well, true, and that's an important point. When you ask yourself as a leader, you know, what do I fear and what am I concerned about? And notice that you have good intentions ultimately. Okay, it's usually the case for your staff members. You know, ultimately, however they're behaving that seems a little out of the norm, if it's going to probably be fear-based. Okay, and they're not going to say, I'm really afraid. They're going to say things and do things that show concern. And it's being able to read the signs of that, you know, frictious tempers and irritation. And, you know, various things to just be aware it's probably coming from a place of fear and to just gently sort of acknowledge that. And,
I think some of the questions that we've got here today are almost in that ilk, if you like.
Yes.
Happiness is, again, she's asked, you know, what if I've tried to talk to somebody and before and that conversation's failed? It, you know, doesn't mean, you know, stop having those conversations. It just means trying a different way of having that conversation, you know, tapping into what the receiver is, what is important for the person receiving that conversation, not necessarily what's important for you at that moment in time.
Definitely. So a lot of this is to do as well with language. Do you mean there's language that will provoke people negatively and they won't even realize it and get their backs up and get their concerns up, and there's language that will help. And also, you know, I was thinking as you were talking there, you know, just to sort of be a bit more transparent about your own fears and concerns, you know, especially as the leader, because they will follow your lead. So if you're actively addressing and managing your own fears and concerns and being, you know, as open as you reasonably can be, you know, I want to let you know that I am concerned about the future. I want to let you know that you are very important to me. I will do the very best that I can for you, trying to sort of, you know, navigate and negotiate.
It's easy to think, isn't it, because somebody's in a position of leadership that they haven't got any fears or anxieties. They're feeling the same things that all of us are all feeling, that level of uncertainty. And so there's almost like a pressure, an added pressure on their shoulders.
That's right.
To keep everything together.
Definitely.
And sometimes it's about saying, like you said before, I haven't got all the answers.
Yeah.
Or you know as much as I know right now. But as soon as I know, I will let you know, and I will be checking in. All these things that you're talking about, really.
Yes, and to say them, you know, with some regularity. Do you mean like once a week? Make it your business to just lay out those key messages. I want you to know you guys matter to me. I want you to know this. I want you to know that. Almost proactively, you know, like we said, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. Let certain people know certain things. And again, get organized as a leader. Do you mean if you need an email, there's a service you can use on the web that will send you an email at 9 o'clock twice a week, and all you have to do is set it up. And all it will say on the email is, you know, give affirmations or whatever it is to make sure you get this done. Because those little messages actually mean a great deal. They help people to manage their emotional, you know, fears and concerns.
Which is also another one of happiness's questions, which is interesting. Is what will change mean to me or the individual? You know, it's all, so you've got the team leader, and then you've got the individuals, the staff members, etc. And they're all asking the same question, aren't they?
That's right.
Looking to the leader for an answer, but the leader's got the same question.
Definitely. So this may be useful at this point then. So the new normal, the normal that's not going to stay normal for long, it's going to gradually change and evolve, you know, depending on what government decides is the best way to sort of move forward. The return to work and the catching up. Now, some folks have been off for a while. You know, we may be one of them, some of your folks, but, you know, this really begins at home. If you do this with yourself, I always, on my coach trainings, I say, you know, first person you need to learn to coach is you. Because if you can do this stuff well with you, then you'll be far more equipped to do this with team members too. So, you know, this first question here is, you know, how to proactively lead, to have a proactive team leading kind of care agenda. Is, you know, the first question I suggest is something along the lines of just understanding, you know, where are we each at? So let's begin with you as the leader. You know, where are you at? Now that's going to vary, isn't it? And it will be new again from time to time, because, you know, what's the state of play now is going to be different in a month's time, to another month's time, to another month's time. So you're going to have to keep coming back at least monthly and working out where are we at as individuals, and to be aware firstly where you're at so that you can contrast and compare that to others. And to, again, like I say, check in at various points. So you might want to have every 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a little sit down and check in, not just with your team members, but with you, to work out, okay, where am I at with stuff? And how am I really feeling, and what am I doing about that? And you know, and then apart from that, you know, managing each individual on your team as such, I sometimes do with managers a sort of a piece of paper with a sort of a bit of space for each team member. And what you do is, instead of just having a chat and kind of forgetting it, what you do is you create a little bubble and you put things that are relevant to them in that bubble. Do you mean like what's going on with Jim? Well, Jim's mother's been in the hospital with the virus. So, I mean, that's a big deal for him. Okay, I need to just keep that in mind and understand that his needs are going to be different to someone else's. What's going on with Mary? Well, her and her boyfriend have broken up. So she's got huge issues with childcare. And I just need to sort of be mindful of that and try to sort of, you know, work sensitively with that. Otherwise, we all just become a blur of nice people. And we don't remember that certain things are more important to others. Definitely.
Nigel, are you an NLP practitioner as well?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so how much does NLP come into how you deliver and what you deliver?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I use a lot of what they call the results frame, which is very powerful, and I've certainly seen the power of that in my own life over many, many years. So the results frame basically says you're always getting results in your work, in your situation, in your relationships. Frankly, are they the results that you're looking for right now? So instead of saying, you know, it's right or wrong or good or bad, we just focus on, okay, what you did this and what happened? Okay, is that what you wanted to have happen? And if it isn't, well, then you need to change what you're doing, because, you know, if you keep doing what you keep doing, you're going to keep getting what you keep getting. So that certainly is generally very powerful, because often people get hung up on, you know, good, bad, right, wrong decisions, actions, etc. And it's like, okay, we can't really do that right now. I remember working with some senior people in the business world who said once, you know, we don't have time for storming individually or as a team. You know, the storming stage where we get all upset and this, that, and the other. He just said, okay, we need to stop getting upset, concentrate on, is what we're doing working? Are we getting the results we want, or are we not? And what do we need to change as quickly as possible to get closer to where we want to get to? So that's one way I think things like NLP can be very powerful.
Thank you.
They give you a way, don't they, in that world of NLP, is to have to basically run your brain in a way that can help you just stay focused and productive and not get too, distracted by things that could get in the way.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say that happens a lot though, isn't it? You're tripping yourself up all the time because you let all these things get in the way. And
Yes.
when you analyze, and I'm sitting listening to what you're saying, which is perfectly true, if you just get back to some of the basics and just listen to what the rest of the team, what you're telling yourself as well,
That's right.
it does help, because you're moving forward in a more natural way, as opposed to just moving on and leaving everybody else behind you.
Well, yes, and that results frame is powerful, because what it can do, if you really work with somebody on that, you can help them reformulate how they're saying things to themselves. So, for example, if I say, oh my goodness, it's going to be impossibly difficult, how on earth are we going to cope? Okay, what's that going to produce in me? It's going to produce anxiety. Does anxiety help you navigate, or does it actually really just get in the way? Because anxiety is appropriate often, but if you're going to let that start to take root and get hold, you don't do your best work when you're anxious.
Absolutely.
You're dealing with serious emotional blockers and limitations. So saying, we will get through this, let's work out how. See, right there puts you in a different emotional state. So realizing that what you think affects how you feel, which affects what you're going to be doing, is very, very powerful. So let's do a little bit more here. So, concerns, okay? This is a model we were discussing earlier before we started. Asking the individual, yourself, begin with yourself, okay? What concerns do you have right now? And to just acknowledge them plainly. Because don't forget, once you process things that are going on inside, you can get them out on a piece of paper, in a journal, wherever it is. That will help. Individual instability, and as an organization, concerning the business impact so far and the prospects. What concerns do we each have? And you could share as appropriate your concerns if you're the leader, and just acknowledge them before you have a conversation with your team members, to just get them out and go, yeah, I am definitely concerned about that. But this goes back to something we mentioned earlier, and what can I do about these things? Do I have any control over these things? I don't really have control over what government is going to decide is allowed or not allowed. I don't have control over various things, but to notice what are the things that concern me, and are there any that I just need to acknowledge I don't have any control over? Because then you can move into the conversation with yourself as the leader and with your team about, okay, what are the things that we can influence?
Yes.
Okay, because again, the most resourceful people, let alone the most resourceful leaders and individuals, they get into this issue of, okay, so what of these things can I influence? Now, if you start with the ones that you can clearly influence, what you tell yourself, what you pay attention to, what you concentrate on with your team, okay, well, that's easy. Okay, then if you say, okay, that thing I thought I couldn't do anything about that really does concern me, what can I do about it? So let's give you an example. We've got restaurants around here, okay? And some of those restaurants, I can't have any people come to the restaurant. But some of them, let me tell you, have gotten really good at coming up with ideas for things they can offer to their customer base. They're doing barbecue night packs. They're doing feed the family at the weekend packs. With the chef, he puts together the ingredients and they sell these little packages. It's a modest price and it's a good deal for everybody, but they're getting creative and they're realizing, we can't, influence this, that, and the other, but they realize that they can. And that's quite powerful when you realize that asking that question, what can we do? What could we do? You start to realize I can influence things more than I thought. And then you get busy being productive instead of getting lost in concerns you can't do much about.
Links in really well with some of the stuff that we know about the byproduct of stress, and how when we get stressed and our backs are up against the wall, how we become more creative. We can become more creative and more productive, and our performance increases, etc. It's only when it gets a bit too much that we tip into it being unhelpful levels of it. So what they're doing now is using that stress and the anxiety that we all have again to become more creative and more productive in this time, which is recommended.
Definitely. So in the emotional management world, emotional intelligence is partly, noticing what's going on inside of you and then making the best choice available. Because if you go, you know what, I'm genuinely concerned about this and this, okay, and what can I do about it? Well, what I can do is wear a mask, or I can do this, or I can do that, and then I'm doing the very best I can, and I'm staying action-oriented, because then the stress doesn't own you. You manage it.
I think that's very, very true, and I think this leads us into another question from Happiness about what are the benefits of supporting change? Well, I think that's been answered by what we're saying in the example that you've just given. And obviously the same's happening here in the UK as well, which is great. You know, it shows that it's happening in other places. The people are just trying to support it and demonstrate that they can change and, you know, do a good job, think outside the box.
So some things in with this, just so you see these bits here, you know, suggestions as to what we can influence is the primary thing, but also, you know, focusing on, you know, not on why we're doing what we're doing, you know, as a business or as you know, as an organization, and how what we do does matter and does contribute. You know, so like this session today, you know, we're all meeting here freely at no cost to each other to say, okay, what can we do to influence, you know, leaders who can actually help a lot of people out there struggling. And there's also a thing in there, it talks about a gratitude ritual. I've had a great joy studying this thing they call positive psychology. Okay, and what they find is, you know, happy people, because this concept of being happy and all the other stuff is all very vague and fluffy, but people who are happier and doing better, frankly, in general, tend to just be grateful. You know, I don't know about you, but I got to work this morning and I just thought, you know, I'm really grateful that I'm healthy. I'm really grateful that we've still got a job. I'm really grateful that we're surviving, even though it seemed like we might not. And that simple thing pulls out the positive emotion, concentrates a constructive direction, and then gets you to go, let's go get busy, see what we can do, and just get on with it instead of keep getting distracted.
Absolutely agree. Gratitudes every day.
Definitely.
Got list of them,
And then this is something we've covered, but just to sort of formalize it, you know, when it comes to you, first of all, as a leader, because you mentioned some of these leaders are getting more and more overwhelmed. You know, everything's falling to them, you know, all these big decisions and extra stuff. Okay, but also setting not only moderate and realistic expectations of what you can do versus what you can't do, frankly, what's realistic for you, and concentrating on the prioritize. Because, you know, one of the challenges of leadership is prioritization. You know, like what is the most important issues really right now? And that's changed a lot because what would normally be the priorities just cannot be the priorities. So there's that. So setting moderate and adjustable expectations, because, you know, working out what the priorities are this week, well, it's going to shift a little bit more next week, depending on how this week went, depending on what other things you're having to adjust to or change to. So just being very realistic and accepting. I know my employer has said, you know, there won't be any performance reviews for the next year. There won't even really be any serious interim reviews, you know, unless you're really catastrophically, you know, doing a terrible job. Just be realistic with people and say, look, you know, your job is not normal. What you're doing is not normal. It's going to have to be somewhat fluid. And just, you know, having a bit of moderation about our expectation, not to drop our standards as such, but just to say, okay, we're going to have to be a bit more kind and fluid with each other.
And flexible. It's about being flexible, isn't it?
Definitely. And the vision of what we can even do sometimes as an organization or in the business. So, you know, a little bit of scheduling those regular check-ins. You know, I just want to spend 15 minutes with you just finding out, you know, how you're doing. What concerns have you got? What can we do about those concerns? What can you do really about those concerns? You know, give the individual responsibility. And also, you know, taking in suggestions. I was studying recently, you know, millennials and Gen Z and all this other stuff. They are the generation, you know, what am I, 45? So, you know, people sort of 40 and under, frankly, who want you to hear their voice, who want to know that you're listening. And so more important than ever to say, you know, any ideas for us? Because, you know, some of the tech that's available today, you know, can be tremendously helpful, cost saving, time saving, asking for people any ideas as to how we can do things more efficiently and more effectively, and just allowing people to at least have a voice into that conversation. So, you know, applications, obviously, first of all, to you, if you do with you all of those things, and sometimes, you know, if you report to anybody, okay, in your role, or if you have an accountability partner, sometimes that can be good, or a mentor, to just ask, okay, what do these things mean for me? You know, routinely and quite regularly ask every 2, 3, 4 weeks, you know, what are my current concerns? What am I doing about them? Where am I kind of at? How do I help myself to then eventually help my team? And then, of course, the team applications are pretty obvious. You know, we don't want to just survive this period. We want to do our best to try to thrive, you know, and enjoy a whole new experience at work and see, frankly, where it goes. Because, I mean, I'll give you an example. We have some huge community centers that have started offering, you know, online you know, fitness classes. And some of these centers are like, oh, online fitness classes, who wants to do that? But when they offered them, they went, oh, wow, people really want this stuff. People really like this stuff. We'll do this even when the virus is gone. Because suddenly they realize there's value there for the people that we serve. So, you know, acknowledging that coming up with new ways of doing stuff could be an actual gift. Instead of something.
I think this is, if anything, this has been the godsend.
Yes.
Where it just made people think again, as I said before, outside the box.
Yeah, very much.
Certain ways that you can just go forward and carry on what you've discovered you can do in this time.
Definitely, definitely. So one more thing to just offer you, really, and then we can see where we want to leave things. You know, we talked about, you know, the reforming stage as a team. You know, new tasks, new focus, new directions that are going to shift and gradually keep evolving over time. Okay, well, you're going to be having some reformation as a team around those goals, around those objectives, around those tasks, and you're going to have some bumps in the road. You know, people are going to make the odd poor decision. People are going to drop the ball. Okay, how can you make sure this is a season of learning for you and your team? So there's a little model here. First of all, I think we know if with ourselves, first of all, because if we do this with ourselves, that's even better. We get good at doing it with our team, okay? But I think we need to be sort of assuming a certain amount of turbulence. And the new and the normal is going to keep on changing and adjusting and hopefully expanding, because we want, you know, life to resume in a normal way as time goes on. But who knows how long it's going to take. You know, they're saying it could be January before there's a vaccine, and maybe they'll let people who are immune go work again, or who knows how they're going to happen. That's for other people to decide.
And I think we're not going to find out about this bit for a little while yet. Although we're starting to open up and, you know, people are starting to go back to work, we're not going to feel the effects really of all the changes that have taken place and the things that we need to do into the future until we're well into being back, whatever that means. So whilst people are saying, well, I'm back at work, actually you're going to start to feel some turbulence shortly, even if you're back to work and you think things have been cemented and new processes and systems, because they haven't been tried and tested. So it's not until people are working with those processes that you start to feel what's working really well and what actually isn't working in reality.
Yes. So there's an element of patience, and just acknowledging, you know, it's just not simple and easy, and it's not simple and easy normally, but it's just that much harder because it's somewhat new terrain. So this is an adapted version of a sort of incident review, okay? We don't necessarily need to call it an incident review, but when you've noticed a significant bump in the road, okay, so like our organization, they've been giving away all kinds of food and donations and resources and things, which is all very wonderful, but sometimes they're wondering, okay, where's the rest coming from? You know, like, and so somebody gave away like 5 boxes of food. They just decided to give away 5 boxes of food to an individual instead of 1. Okay, and the boss was like, okay, I understand why you're doing that, but we can't keep doing that. It's just not an option. You know, we've got too many people here looking for food and resources. So what would you do in that situation? You'd ask, first of all, with the individual, you know, what was your aim when you did this? And then you're going to get the good intentions. Well, this lady, you know, she's got, you know, 10 kids or grandkids or whatever. And, you know, okay, that was your goal. Okay, I hear, I understand, I acknowledge your goal and how applaudable that was. Okay. What went well? Okay, well, it's great that you certainly got some food to these folks, and that's the wonderful thing. Okay, and so, you know, anything in there that you want to keep doing, well, let's certainly, you know, explore people's circumstances, etc. And then eventually you need to get to what would we like to go differently next time. Okay, and to not sort of have to necessarily be punitive or punishing, but to just say, I just need to let you know that next time around, what I'd like to see happen, what we need to see happen, is, you know, a moderate, you know, gift of a donation instead of a big one. Because, you know, we just still do have to really, or at least, you know, ask these questions a little bit more and come talk to me, if you would please, about such scenarios in the future. And then what we'd like to have go differently. Notice the language. Okay, you did this, and this is the result you got. Okay, and what would we like to have gone differently or have go differently next time? It's not punitive, it's not judgmental. It's just saying, okay, what's done is done. Let's all be grown-ups and get over it, and acknowledge that next time around we'd like something to go differently. So this is, you know, kind of neutral language, where we're not having to be too harsh with somebody where they've made, you know, a forgivable mistake. And so the next question is simply, you know, what will we be doing differently next time? And it may be that you share that with the whole team, if you're the leader, and say, look, you know, we had an incident the other day, you know, it's okay, you know, we're living in strange times, and this is what we want you to do, please, in future. Is, you know, check in with Dave, check in with Jane, whatever it is, to make sure this never, ever happens again. Because that way you're pulling the wisdom of what these scenarios that are new and different sometimes are teaching you.
Good stuff. And it's a classic, look, almost like a reflective tool, isn't it? One that we use a lot when we're working with clients, taking them down around this cycle of, you know, to get to the point of, you know, if you were in a similar situation again, what would you do differently?
And again, it's something to get good at as a leader, because if you notice my staff are texting me, my staff are this, that, and the other, and that's not actually not the best way to handle things. Okay, what do I want them to do differently? Okay, the answer is please do call me. I will pick up. That's just because we just need to have a dialogue instead of texting. There's a lot of texting going on these days, emails and all this other nonsense. Okay, talk to each other. You know, just maybe the biggest lesson.
Human contact.
I think that's so important. Texting's one thing, you know, when you have got a message or something quick to say, but always try and talk where you can.
That's right.
I've always felt that way.
And again, notice that what those things do is they help you create proactively those norms. What are the current or new norms that we need to be adopting for the foreseeable future until we change again, until we adapt again? And helping to actively cultivate those norms, because what you don't create consciously will tend to just drift along and become a default. And suddenly you realize you've got underlying problems because you're not learning the lessons. And I think as a leader, you need to learn your lessons and then help the team to learn theirs, which effectively means you're coaching, which is always a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So good. People can apply that to themselves. And again, anything we talked about today, I would just say, you know, apply this to yourself, get good at using it with you, and then it will be a breeze to use with your team. And then I think the applicability of those things to help your team actually sort of learn how to thrive as best they can should be coming through as well. So any thoughts and reflections?
Well, a lot. I mean, a lot. Let's start, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of this which I just feel works, and I've always felt that communication on the phone or actually going to see the person is what works. Always respect the person's view, even although it might not be yours and it might not be the way the team should be going or you as the leader should be going. Definitely. But to listen anyway. We talked about this, Marcia and I, over the time about trying to listen more to the words as opposed to just listening to the person at the time. And I think this applies to all of that. And but I think I'm a great one for trying to do face-to-face or certainly phone somebody, text or email where necessary, but just to make them feel that they're being heard or at least considered.
And so just to put it out there then, there is a very powerful place at the right times and in the right context to either make happen or get to happen, you know, FaceTime and these kinds of things where you can actually see the person that you're talking to, because, you know, there really is a place for that, both at home for the individual and for anybody sort of interested in this material, but also just at work, is to say, you know, can we please do a FaceTime or some kind of video chat so you can see them? Because you know when they're going, okay, and now they could be going, whatever. But you won't know unless you can actually see them and watch their reactions. Because, you know, you don't need to be an expert in that stuff to understand, okay, they look really not engaged, even at the words, the tones. You know, and it sort of humanizes the whole thing. You know, I've come across somebody recently who hasn't had physical contact with another human in 2 months. And so, you know, people can be in strange spaces. I mean, I've been talking lately about, you know, COVID brain or COVID moments where you realize I'm not quite my normal self, or my judgment is not quite as on point as normal. And it's partly just the cumulative effects of all of this.
Not as sharp. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
just out of touch.
Well, wow.
Well, I'm looking at the fact that you've used facilitate and enable, and this is part of the discussion that we had with Chris Sweeney. I think we asked a question around, do we manage, lead, facilitate, or is a change, or is there another word? And he threw up actually we enable change as leaders. So it's interesting that you've got that there, because manage is more about resources, isn't it? Which obviously people are a resource in the broadest sense of the word, but he is stuck with enabling.
Well, definitely, and that's another important point about words. You know, the classic definition, isn't it, is, you know, that you lead people, you manage resources. Okay, sometimes we need to be reminded of that. Okay, the word facilitate, the technical meaning of that is make it easier for. And again, a good boss, I mean, the best bosses I've ever had say, okay, so this all sounds great and good. Okay, and what do you need from me? That's it. I know you can do this. Okay, what do you need from me to make it easier for you to do your job? And so, like you say, enablement, I mean, part of that learning the lessons model is, okay, how do we want as a team to do this differently so it's easier, more effective, more efficient, a better experience for our clients, our customers, and to just enable them to get on with the job. Because, you know, I've certainly seen it over the years, you know, lots of barriers to just getting the basics done. And, you know, to let people say, you know, what's getting in the way for you and your work? You know, how can we get around that the best we can? Definitely.
I really did like the way you used that distinction. So it's really good to see that it's here too, on these slides as well.
Yeah, and to acknowledge that, you know, there's going to be fear, you know, as you let people sort of, you know, spread their wings a little bit. But you see, I think, again, it's like everything, isn't it? If you can seize this period as a time to actually grow as a leader yourself, and then learn to manage your team even better, then you could actually take a lot from this period and, yeah, do well overall.
And you haven't got to rush anywhere. I mean, another question from Happiness was, what is the rush? And this is really the mindset now that, yes, there will be, when things get back to normal, everybody be rushing about. But now is the time just to sit and think and digest and support change, which Chris does over the years. But yeah, support the change, not necessarily lead it. Go with the group and learn from them. So you've got all this and more time to do this now.
And acknowledge that, you know, that what, you know, who are we and what do we do is going to adjust a little bit, and it may even broaden and expand or be refined by this period to just be a little bit different to what it was to begin with, and that may be good. You may discover some new ways of working, some new ways of relating to the people that you serve.
Or happily reverting back to some old ways of working, which work.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what they say, don't they?
I keep my babies. I've got
Definitely. And you'll probably see some team members flourish in all of this, you know, that you realize, wow, they have a lot more potential than we usually maybe thought. So, yeah, kind of exciting.
Is that the end of the slides then for you, Nigel?
We are done.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to slide there, but yeah, okay.
That's brilliant, really good. And I think Happiness will be really pleased. I mean, she knows I'm going to be using her name. She was very happy for me to use her name to ask the questions, for me and Carol to do that. So I'm sure she'll be really happy with the information that she's got here. There's a lot to sift through. There's a lot to go back and ponder and think about. And it is very unique to us, this process of going through change. How we deal with it is very unique to us. There isn't necessarily a one size that fits all.
No.
There'll be elements of that, but in general, because we're very unique individuals, it will affect us in unique ways.
Well, true, and some of us, our defaults, I mean, I think the human default is a little bit change resistant to begin with, from what I understand of it, but also, you know, some folks are just naturally not into change. They like routine, they like, you know, repetition, they like predictability. And so those of us that are a bit more comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty and variety will be okay, but they've got to understand there are people around us who get very concerned that things are not normal. And that's very unsettling, and to just, you know, really help those folks to just, do the best they can, and also create some predictability.
It's that margin, isn't it, where our routines can support us and enable us, or they can actually disable us and keep us stuck. And it's how you nudge people out of a routine that's not really supporting them in a productive way, but they're taking on as a comforter into a routine that's maybe supporting their journey in the long term. And that's, you know, the mentoring coaching that we do is all about that, nudging people gently by getting them to examine themselves and their behaviours and their thinking and the emotion that is associated with all of that as well.
Yes, and that word routines are important because, you know, one of the first things that disappears when this kind of stuff comes along that's huge and significant is routine. The routine that normally served you suddenly goes to the wall, and it's like, okay, what do I do now? And so sometimes you've got to do what I think you're implying, which is create a new routine that will serve you for now until it needs revising again. And then you're going to have to reassess again. So it's really a time of, I think, exciting growth for people that are willing to say, you know what, I'm going to do my very best to learn from this experience and explore some new ways.
Nigel, that's been absolutely brilliant. I would like to ask if there are any more questions that are thrown up from your presentation, if I could invite you back maybe to answer some of those questions after people have had a chance to have a look at it and reflect on the information. I think that would be quite useful, and really for me to have a look back and to look at the information as well, and maybe throw in a few of my own questions.
Sounds good. Something that inspired me many years ago was just realizing that, you know, as a leader, you make a difference to a lot of people. And so really helping leaders to get to grips with what they need to get to grips with in order to better serve their team, you can actually impact a lot of people. So that's why it's good to have these dialogues.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to inviting you back.
Hey, see you soon.
Thank you, Nigel. Bye for now.
Thank you. See ya.